Hi everybody, my name is Alan. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. It's just an interesting time now, and as I've said on a number of shows before, you could say the same thing almost every time. Every time we do a show, it's an interesting time. There are things happening in our individual lives, there are things happening in our collective lives as nations, as humans, as husbands, as fathers, as children. Every one of us has a story in our lives. There are a lot of stories in the naked city. There are a lot of stories in this world, and each of us has one. And what I was thinking about, this week in particular was, what is really important in our lives? What do we put, as human beings, what do we have in this life? And what we have is time and attention. That's really all we ultimately have in this life, if you look at it a certain way. And what do we put our time and attention on? And do we put it on the things that really empower us, that really inspire us, that bring us that joy, that infinite love, that glory of being a human being? And for so many of us, to one degree or another, probably all of us, our time and attention is spent on things that don't really bring us that creativity, that joy, that love, that compassion, that experience of the oneness. And it really, it takes the breath out of our life. It takes that power and glory of being a human being out of our lives. I was just this week, we do the show in 21st century America. We do it in California, USA. And I guess throughout the world, because it is a small place with the internet and with TV and satellite TV everywhere. And how many people care about Joe Millionaire? How many people care about The Bachelorette and spend hours and hours ruminating over it? And all those types of literally idiotic pursuits. And they're fine. They're fine in some level of our time and attention. But don't we have to commit to an understanding and just a commitment to that our lives are so important, that each one of our individual human lives is so powerful and have so much of an experience, a possibility of an experience of joy and love, that at least a good part of our time and attention has to be put on how we can recognize that, how we can experience that oneness, that love, that connection between us all. And if we're not doing that, no one else pays the price. We pay the price individually. And, every show has those people who, to one extent or another, have committed their lives to that experience of love through music, through books, through workshops, through seminars. And tonight on Bridging Heaven and Earth, it's no exception. We have Donna Thomson with us. She's a spiritual teacher. She's the author of a new book, The Great Goddess Calls Her Daughters. She runs workshops and seminars with our other guest, Annette Caner, who's just a magical musician. And she's been on the show before. She did a magnificent performance with Shanti, Shivani. And we just got many, many calls to get her back. And, she lives in New Mexico, and both Donna and Annette flew in just to do the show, and we're just completely honored to have both of them here and to share their commitment in their lives as mothers, as wives, as husbands, as everything they do. I guess they're not husbands. That would be more me, although I've never done that either. But their commitment to sharing that experience, to having that experience and sharing it. So we're just so honored to have them with us. And for you, it's an opportunity to, once again, remember where we want to put our time and attention, where we want our love to go, how we want to experience more love. So, as we normally do at this time, join me in a short meditation, and then we're going to come on with Annette doing her first set, and then Donna's going to be with us. It should be an extraordinary experience. So if you don't know how to meditate, just relax, settle in, and as I always say, the next 55 minutes can be an experience of enlivenment, of growth, of reconnection. So please join me. He did finally come out of it, actually. Okay, so we're going to begin tonight's show with an improvisational piece by Annette Caner. It's Invocation of the Goddess. It is written and performed by Annette. And just settle in. Annette? Wow, thank you. And now we're on the side with Donna. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, there's a lot of talk now, and you've written a book, and it was the invocation of the goddess. How would you define what the goddess is? We have about 200 years.
Yes. It depends a lot on what point of view you're speaking from, but I think that what Annette just sang was the invocation of the goddess, and what Annette and I work with together is actually bringing that divine feminine present in its wholeness. And so the way I would define the goddess is a living divine presence, able to be there for us today in today's world. So often the goddess has been split and fragmented into little pieces. And so she's considered as an archetype, or she's considered as a myth or a legend or a self-help tool. But the goddess as living presence is what we are working with.
As an energetic...
As the divine, as God.
As God.
As Mother, Father, Goddess. You know, as that original source. That's about the best that I can put it into.
So in other words, like,
words.
What you're saying is what has traditionally been called the God energy is the goddess, is just that energy, the infinite energy.
Yep.
And so whatever tool you use to get into that experience, to have that experience, to recognize that's what you are. Great.
Exactly. And she says, you know, I am the source, I am the void, I am that from which all is created. It's in a way beyond words. You can't actually define her.
It's hard to define anything, really. I mean, I always say that there are 3 dots before everything and 3 dots after, so it's always the infinite into the infinite into the infinite.
Exactly.
So you wanted to, or you had a passage from the new book that you'd like to read about this
I
goddess.
would like to read.
Why don't you do that, and then we'll talk about it.
Talk more about it, because this introductory passage has to do with that return, the return of the divine feminine. And the book is called The Great Goddess Calls Her Daughters. For thousands of years she has watched. Now she descends. The Great Mother comes, calling her daughters. Her time of watching is done. The Great Mother will not suffer patiently and in silence forever. Her primal force manifests through earth and sky, fire and water. The great goddess will again appear in ice and fire, in storm and earthquake, in tidal wave and drought. She cries, enough, to war, famine, and oppression. She comes clothed in her robe of stars and gathers her daughters around her. She says, my daughters, I have had to withdraw further and further from you, as you have had to withdraw from me. Know me now. I am here. I am here for you, to guide you, to help you, to bring you greater wisdom and understanding. I am here to love you. I am here to heal your loneliness, your sense of isolation, and your fear. The great goddess tells a story. Long, long ago, my daughters were taken from me. Taken from my arms, thrust out into the world, denied any contact with me. They were forced to reject and abandon me. And so, my daughters, you have suffered. You have looked for me, and yet we have been kept apart. I come now to remind you of my presence, to gather my daughters around me once again, so that you may hear the story of how long ago we were separated, and yet now we find each other. It is the story of return, embrace, tears, laughter. I have been lonely, my daughters, for you, as you have been lonely for me.
Would you say, I mean, that's really beautiful, but would you say that when you use the word daughters, I mean, we talked about this before, you know, all those dumb male physical forms, I mean, is that a metaphor for everyone and just...
You know, that was, in a way, it was a little difficult for me, but that was really how it came, and it isn't meant to be exclusive, but there's two things. One is that as I've experienced this communication with and from the Divine Feminine, she says to the men, you have all been my daughters. Somewhere inside you is the memory, the knowing of the feminine in yourself. And she comes to awaken the feminine. And therefore, she comes to awaken the feminine in men as well as women, certainly. And it's interesting because I was saying this to a friend of mine and he said, that's a really interesting thought. I've never exactly thought of myself before as a daughter of the goddess, but it's really kind of
well, I mean,
interesting
certainly
to
if we think of, you know, past lives and everybody's been almost everything. So.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, we always cut a piece of the infinite and give a story to it.
And so she comes to recall that history to help that feminine emerge in both the man and the woman. But she also says that there's a balancing here, that for many centuries women have sat in the outer circle or been excluded from the temple and have listened to the men being addressed, basically. And so now we have a time of balancing, and then we move beyond that there's no more inner circle and no more outer circle and no more hierarchy and no more domination of male or female. So it's just a little balance.
It would seem to be better that way.
It would seem to be.
Right. And so when did, you know, why don't you tell your story about how this information started coming to you and through you? And...
Well, the work that I do, I call awareness sessions. In those sessions, they're intuitive readings, and in those sessions I'm simply in touch with what I describe as another level of awareness. And that, to work on this book, what I did was I go into that awareness, which is essentially a meditative state, and ask for connection with that divine feminine. And then the words come. So I speak the words, I record them, and then I transcribe them, you know, to have them in written form. And
you do that in your sessions too?
The connecting with the awareness.
Right.
Yeah, that basically is exactly what I do. That awareness is able to look more deeply, to see from a wider point of view. I don't say that I'm channeling the goddess. It's more like I feel that it's interpreting. And obviously, if you read any kind of literature throughout the ages, whenever there's a connection with spirit or the divine, it's very clear that it's coming in a particular time, in a particular culture, a particular place. And so for me, this is my interpretation of the goddess speaking in today's world and today's
Joe
culture.
Millionaire world we live in.
Exactly. And
yeah,
you
there
know,
has to be a lot going on.
And what you said was really so true. What we focus our attention on is so important. And these days, people feel so stressed and so demanded on that I don't have time to meditate.
A lot of busyness.
Yeah, exactly. I don't, and that's another. I also teach meditation, and the thing that I say to people over and over again is, meditative time is different from ordinary time. That even if you only have 2 minutes to go into that place of connection with...
If we really connected one breath a day,
exactly,
the whole world would change.
Exactly.
To really connect.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons then why it's so important, because we are so demanded on, because there are all these other things that draw our attention and images that come into us, to take just that few moments.
What did he say? If you're too busy to meditate, you're too busy? Isn't that what Maharishi said very clearly?
Yeah, yeah.
And you find that people are more and more open to that. Their lives are so crazy that the awareness that that connection really needs to be made is getting stronger and stronger.
I do find that. I mean, everywhere that I go, people are so hungry for connection with the divine, you know.
I mean, it's so, I mean, all this stuff, I mean, beyond Joe Millionaire in the back, I mean, you know, countries and religions, I mean, it just doesn't do it. You know, and it has to be done. I mean, it's really, you know,
Because that's also what I find, is that there are so many people who have turned away from institutionalized, organized religion, and yet they're hungry for their own connection with the goddess, God, Great Spirit, whatever. You know, I'm not attached to the use of the word goddess. Everybody has their own path, but it's just, for me right now, that energy of the divine feminine has been so powerful, and my own spiritual path took me from many years in Buddhism and the practice of Zen to suddenly, everywhere I went, I was encountering some form of the Divine Mother or other. And it was really clear that in some way she was calling. She was calling. And
yeah, what did, I guess Don once said, pick any path with heart and follow it to the end. I mean, it really doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You know, we just want to get to the, you know, to home. You know, and there are a lot of ways home. It's just how do we get there? I mean, a lot of the ways, because, you know, you get even in Buddha lineages, you get all the lineages fighting. You know, we're so whacked that it's, you know, even in the spiritual path is all that stuff. Ego is just a tricky business, I mean.
It is a very tricky business, and my experience with spiritual communities and organized sorts of things led me to understand that even more deeply, how tricky it is.
And if all we need to do is look inside ourselves every couple of, you know, minutes or seconds.
Well, you know, that's something I was reflecting on recently, was that, you know, I basically entered that path of Zen Buddhism when I was about 21 years old, and I was intensively involved in it for about 15 years. And now, many, many years later, I realized that a lot of the things that I was practicing then and really devoted to, I suddenly realized they're real. You know, all those nice things that they say in the spiritual texts, like about surrendering your ego and giving up and jumping off the cliff, it's like a moment-to-moment thing. And when you really start doing it, it's very, very, very challenging. It's very different.
Challenging, and then you, in a way, you've left all the lineages behind.
Yeah.
You know, because then, you know, love and motion doesn't have a religion. It doesn't have a...
It doesn't have an institution, it doesn't have an organization. And so very often in my work with people, I find that, you know, I can no longer prescribe a particular spiritual path for everybody, but for some people they may need a particular tradition or spiritual path for a period of time. They may not, or they may need one for a certain period of time and then not again, you know, a different one. And my own sense is that we all need, in today's world, with all those different influences, a lot of different options. That even in meditation, you know, I did this one practice for 15 years, but I really believe now that even in meditation, what works one day may not be the right thing the next day. It's like this awareness of having.
I think that's what you know, the idea behind being born again is that every day, you know, you're there for the day. You know, you're available for a gesture. Your consciousness is taking you.
Right. Yeah. That every day, that awareness is a constant process of attention to the moment. You know, which is again what you read in all the books. But actually living that is really a wonderful and challenging thing to do. So, and one of the things that has come up in the goddess communication and work is, she says, she says, I've been called by many names, which she has, you know, there's countless names. One of my most true names that few people call me is Great Mother Transformation, because that energy comes to bring transformation and to help people transform. And so she suggests, why not call on me? And she suggests the prayer, O Great Mother Transformation, take me where you will. And then she says, but don't say it unless you really mean it. because it will be a ride. And I have experienced that, but I can feel the power of that prayer. Oh, great Mother Transformation, take me where you will.
Thy will be done.
Yeah, exactly.
You know. I mean, you know, it's always the same, really. It's just we change the words a little. You were going to read a little dream sequence, then we're going to have Annette do her dream, her goddess dream piece. So, yeah, why don't you do that, and then we'll go right to Annette.
This is what Annette and I do together, is we do a meditative reading where I read from the book and then she sings, and it's sort of a long, extended meditation with the goddess. Dream. She comes as night, deepest night, clothed in stars. She comes as midnight, the dark hour before the dawn. She who is without end, infinite, vast. She comes as dream and vision. She comes as the darkness from which the day emerges, the dream from which the mind emerges, the vision from which the world emerges. She says, in the depths of night, I give birth to day. In the depths of darkness, I give birth to light. In the depths of dream, I give birth to you, to the world, to the universe. She gathers her daughters in her arms and says, my daughters, join me in my dream. Come now, dream with me. As you fall asleep at night, turn your heart to me. Together, my daughters, we can dream a different future for this world. Together we can dream a world of love, of peace, of conflict that is not carried into hatred and aggression, but resolved through dialogue, communication, and understanding. We can dream a world where male and female are equal partners, where spirit and human are equal partners, where the divine intelligence and the human intelligence are inseparably united in a great cosmic flow of being. Dream with me, my daughters. Envision, imagine. You are the gateway. You are the doorway through which my dream enters this world. It is the dream of all eternity, all time, and all that is beyond time. As you dream, you join your sisters who also dream. Together we dream, and because day is night in another part of the world, someone is always dreaming. Somewhere always, there is a woman dreaming, dreaming, dreaming.
La
Thank you, Annette. That was fantastic. So we're back on the set with Donna. Wow, pretty beautiful. So you guys do like workshops and seminars together where you talk and Annette sings and plays and...
We don't actually do whole like day-long workshops. We do an evening, and it's as I said, sort of an extended guided meditation with the goddess where, yeah, I read from the book, she sings, I read, she sings, and it's a long night. We could go on all night, but we have the feeling, you know, better it's to put a little limit on it, maybe, you know, and it's again that invoking the goddess, and that does it through song, and I do it through the spoken word, you know, so it's like a celebration of the goddess in song and spoken word. And then I do, I'm beginning to do workshops that, in the past, the workshops I've done have been mostly meditation in a more straightforward awareness kind of way, but I'm starting to do workshops on that connecting with the divine feminine and with prayers and meditations and rituals, again, that have come up in the process of doing the book.
When did you, like, let's say not leave Buddhism, but find that, you know, something else was calling?
Expanded. Well, as I said, I was in the Zen community for 15 years.
And you were actually living in the community, and that was...
Yes, it was, when I say 15 years...
I mean, that's the Zazen with the black
Yes, that's Zazen with the...
Wow,
that's the full
really,
thing.
The full tilt,
yeah,
huh?
yeah.
Wow.
It was the focus of my life for that period of time, from the time I was 21 till 36. And, you know, my son was raised there. I met my husband there. But it was an interesting experience because it was sort of a very semi-monastic kind of environment, and yet that is where I was married and my child grew up there. I left that community in 1985, and at that point I had to get a job. You know, I'd been living this semi-monastic life for a while, and in the process of looking for the job, I met a woman who was a trance medium who helped me very much. I went to see her, we did sessions, and shortly after that, I found my own connection to channeling opening. And which for me, having been in Zen, which is very, you know, straightforward and doesn't get into that sort of thing, was quite an experience.
The work of the devil, but not quite.
Yeah,
not
almost,
quite,
exactly, not far away.
Right.
And so I began to work with that. I let myself open up to it, and at that time, it was more of a channeling experience. There was a spirit guide who worked with me and through me, and at the same time...
So, I mean, in other words, you've had a hunger to know truth, God, Goddess, infinite, creator, early on.
All
and
my
that
life.
So your time and attention
has gone in that direction.
Pretty much that direction.
It really has gone in that direction. Right. And every step of the way, I've been taken my next step. Like, you know, literally, I found this woman, I found the job in the newspaper, you know, it was a want ad, and it took me to that next connection. And as I began to do my work with the channeling and travel with that, as I said, everywhere I went, I met a manifestation of the Divine Mother of one sort or another, Amaji, Mother Mira, several other beings that were very helpful to me. And then
about 90% of the people in the spiritual community channel Mother Mary anyhow. So it's hard to miss her.
Right.
She's around a lot.
Well, actually, what I said was Mother Mira.
No, I know, but there is
Mother Mary. There is Mother Mary
Mary
too. Exactly. No, she's everywhere. She's there in that flower. She's there in the Buddha. You know, and so it took me a while to realize that, though, and
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems to take a while, the human form for that.
And so I can't say that I ever really left Buddhism, but I would no longer say I was a Buddhist.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. It just expands. It's like the flower. It just opens and opens and opens. And I feel really blessed to have had the guidance that I've had, so that every time it's time for a new door to open,
I mean, I think the only problem is that, you know, sometimes it's meant to leave, and just the habitualness of it, like anything else, and then your identity is that I'm a Buddhist, rather than,
yes,
you know,
rather than
I'm the infinite, and everything falls under that.
I would say that when I left the spiritual community I'd been a part of for 15 years, it was one of the most profound experiences of my life, because I had to look within, and I had to find my teacher within, and I had to find out really who I was.
Because you're not a Buddhist.
Right.
Not in the true sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's one description that I gave myself for a period of time. And I realized how dependent I had become, how much of my identity, in a way.
Amazing.
Well, I went when I was so young to that place, and I was in a search for identity, and I found an identity, you know. And then in Buddhism, there's a whole theme of leaving home. The Buddha, as part of his life story, left home, and what I realized is maybe the spiritual journey is a constant process of leaving home. It's a constant process of shedding the layer that we take on. We take on a certain identity to go to our next step, and then in order to go to the next step, we take that off.
Yeah, most people think it's to have more experience, you add more on, but actually it's unwinding it.
It's unwinding. Again, there's the story of the goddess Donna and the 7 veils, that, you know, as she goes into the underworld, she has to take off layer after layer after layer. And there's times when it's uncomfortable.
Is it underworld or underwear?
No, it's underworld.
Oh.
She
She
gets down to her underwear, but she's in the
I
underworld.
never could figure out what. I always got those figs. And you know, I mean, another thing that happens in a lot of those, you know, not just Buddhism, we're using Buddhism as an example because that's the one you did, but it all becomes so serious too.
Yes.
And we lose a lot of the joy and the playfulness and the childlikeness of, you know, being a child in this magnificence.
I was very serious for 15 years. I was very, very serious, which again has,
no, it was a perfect place.
Right, but there is a poem by Rumi that goes something like, I used to sit on my mat and pray with somber dignity. Now I sit at the table and call for more wine as children run through. And I feel that shift in myself, you know, like, I was thinking about that coming to speak with you because one of the things I love most to do now is just talk with people, just hang out and talk about the kinds of things we're talking about. There's a phrase in the Sufi tradition, actually, it's a spiritual practice in certain aspects of the Sufi tradition to talk, to have conversation. They call it divine conversation. There's a word for it.
Satsang?
No, satsang is in the Hindu tradition, but it's like sorbet.
Obviously,
right. There's
like
all the traditions,
a big mess.
It's like sorbet, but it's not sorbet. Maybe anyway. It's divine conversation. That by speaking, it's invoking again. By speaking about these things, we bring them present. We bring the energy present. We experience it. We share it. You know, which is why that's what I feel like you're doing on the show with so many people on such a wider scale. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. You know, really, I mean, you know, we on the, you know, the crew and the people who do bridging, we feel so honored that people literally come in all over the world like 25 times a year.
Yeah.
You know, just so passionate and so, you know, delighted to be living their life and sharing their joy. For the most part, you know, we all have human frailties if we're willing to admit them, I think. Most of them have them somewhere along the line, but you know, generally speaking, that, you know, it's just a real gift to be able to, you know, lead the kind of life you're living and bringing that understanding and that connection to people.
It is a gift, and that sense of the lightness is, you know, these days especially, it's not easy to feel light, and sometimes it isn't even perhaps appropriate. That balance of, you know, from the Buddhist point of view, the Buddha said, you know, everything is impermanent. All joy changes to suffering. And the communication of the divine feminine that I've experienced is everything is impermanent. All suffering turns to joy. And that constant cycle, that constant interplay. And
well, would you say that's more like the surface of the ocean, and there is a place where people in spiritual practice have called it bliss, where those things are happening and somebody else could look at it and say, oh, that's a sad day for that person. But it's really not, because they're not connected to that, although they're living it. There are probably 3 people on Earth who have that experience.
I was going to say,
Theory, yeah.
that I think that, you know, of course there are beings that experience that deep level of oneness. And for me, again, I think perhaps because for many years in my spiritual practice I used that perspective to close out my feelings of sorrow and joy in a way, and that was something I only realized later, that the realizing the incredible blessing of this human life, where we experience the human and the sorrow and the joy, and being really one with it, that is somehow for me what I'm working with. I know there are people that experience it all as bliss, but I have to say, along with the goddess, that my response to war, for example, or to violence, to the suffering that I see, is not bliss, but a wail, a howl, a weeping. But would I say you were gonna ask? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The duality is, you know, tricky to deal with.
Well, yeah, duality is very tricky to deal with. That's what we're here doing. Is
I mean, the interesting, you know, to be infinite and to think you're separate. You know, I mean, that's like the whole experiment here, and that's what all of us are working in, the recognition and the experience of that, because we are infinite. You know, those on either side of the battlefield.
Right. And there's something that you said earlier about love, you know, that does seem like ultimately the answer. And the one of the communications, again, that's in the book in relation to the goddess is about the incredible importance of that in our world today, which is no big news. We all know that, you know, we all know that, exactly.
It just didn't come up in yesterday.
Exactly, it's been like that for centuries, but it does seem like it's getting more pressing as to whether or not we can live that. In essence, it seems like we have a choice, you know, upon which the future of our existence depends, and that is, can we learn to live from love, love of life, love of the world, love of our children, love of each other, not like sometime in the future of the earth. Well, I'm not sure about the earth. To me, sometimes it feels like the earth might manage to survive us. You know, it might actually manage.
As a human experiment.
As the human beings that we are and have been. If we can learn to live from love, it means we have to let go of that ancient need to control, to dominate, to consume. That what we need to evolve is exactly the opposite of what we've needed to evolve up to this point. And, you know, it's really true. There's nothing new about any of this. It was said 2,000 years ago, love your enemy. It's just more pressing even than ever because of the technologies that we have, that we get it, that we do that transformation. And of course...
I mean, is that like the way the play was, in a sense, set up, that it would have to be? Because we're so thick that we couldn't
get it otherwise. Exactly. That it seems to me that it's often set up that way. In my personal life, I've often experienced being so thick that I didn't get it till I was like, you know...
Yeah, I mean, I think part of like wisdom and spiritual growth is that we get more subtle, so it doesn't take a Mack truck to slow us down a little.
Yeah.
You know, because we're more present, so the horses aren't as far from the corral.
You get a little better at reading the message, getting the message, feeling... Although I say that with...
No, I understand. No, we all say that with not quite a forked tongue, but... So maybe what we'll have now, we'll go to Annette's third piece, and then we'll come back and just say goodnight to everybody. Okay. So Annette's third piece, again, is an improvisational piece. It's a prayer of gratitude to the goddess, Annette Cantor. Wow, again, thank you, Annette. That's fantastic. So, in the next, I guess we maybe have like 3, 4, 5 minutes. If the goddess has a message for her children, what would it be through you?
The message that she would have is, in one word, remember. Remember who you really are. Inside you, there is a wisdom, an ancient wisdom. She says, my daughters, I bring you the key to that door that has been locked. It's as though there has been another commandment. Thou shalt not know your own wisdom. And she says, my daughters, remember. Remember your wisdom. Trust your wisdom. She says, my daughters, I bring you baskets of the forbidden fruit. There is no bliss greater than wisdom, no happiness greater than knowledge.
Wow, the forbidden fruits. Wow, all right. But this, and we discussed at the beginning, it's not just for the daughters, so it's everybody.
Not.
Okay,
it's for all the daughters.
All right, forbidden fruits for everybody. Okay, kids, now we can. So, I guess, we're coming to the end of the show again. So it's, it's truly, our lives are miracles. The fact that we can look in the mirror and there's a consciousness looking back and seeing what we see in the mirror and seeing the glory of our own existence, which we don't always see. I would suspect that there are very few people on earth who look in the mirror or, like we were talking earlier, consciously know their own glory, that, that they are love, that they are God, and that they can't be anything else than that. So the opportunity is there for us to take this information, to take this love, to take this vibration that Donna and Annette brought, and bring it more into the world. As this show hits everywhere on the internet, in all the cities we go to, we can, each of us who are watching the show, bring it into the world. If anybody got questions about Annette or Donna, call me, Alan, at 805-687-2053. Let's go get them. Let's put our time and attention on love. Good night. God bless you. We love you.